10, 9, 8, 7, 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, 0.
All right, welcome back to the Rising Coaches Podcast. I'm Adam Gordon, and we appreciate you tuning in. Today's episode is brought to you by Lucio Sports. Lucio Sports, their suite of apps integrate everything you do with your basketball team, your athletes, your coaching staff, and puts them all together in an easy, digestible, and presentable way. They are revolutionizing timeout huddles. They've been featured on NBA TV. You can see various NBA coaches using the apps on their iPad right there in front of their team in timeouts, showing play animations and diagrams, and even all the way down to the high school level. Our guy Dennis Hopkins used it in his playoff game last weekend in a timeout. So great stuff presented by Lucio Sports. Make sure you check them out at luciosports.com. Okay, very excited about our guest today. Our guest is Joe Prunty. Going chronologically here, Joe has spent over 20 years in the NBA with organizations like the Spurs, the Mavericks, the Blazers, the Cavs, the Nets, the Bucks, the Suns, and with Team USA. I hope I didn't get that wrong, Joe. But welcome. We're very excited to have you.
Thanks, Adam. I'm excited to be on.
Yeah. So we're going to get into a lot. We got a lot to talk about. I certainly want to talk about the America Cup prelims that you guys just competed in and went 6-0 in. I certainly want to talk about your NBA coaching career, spend some time talking about the Spurs culture and the 3 championships you won there. But before all that, Joe, you were selling beer in San Diego, right?
Yes, I was.
So how do you go from a beer salesman to what I just named off?
Sure. No, what happened was I graduated from college and I needed to get a job. I needed to earn some money. It's funny how that works. And so I moved down to San Diego and was trying to, interviewed at a few different places, spoke to a few different people. And the one that came available was with Coast Distributing. And it was one of those situations that not only allowed me to start earning some money, but it allowed me to volunteer coaching on the side after I had kind of gotten involved for a few years. So very fortunate that I was able to get a job as quickly as I was, having traveled down to San Diego. But like I said, felt very fortunate, and it allowed me to get into coaching as well.
Okay, so you're selling beer. I'm not even going to ask how much you took home after the workday. You're coaching. What level is it? Youth basketball or high school?
High school. Yeah, I was coaching freshman and varsity at the time. Assistant.
Okay.
I had freshman, assistant varsity.
So how does that translate or transition into your pro coaching career?
Well, the biggest part was the realization that I wanted to try to get into coaching full time. And like I said, I worked really hard, got a job pretty quickly out of college. Once that happened, realizing that I wanted to devote more time to coaching, I decided that I was going to get a teaching credential. And so I was going to quit the industry and devote my time to eventually trying to get a Division I coaching job or see where the career path with basketball took me. And essentially, I started doing camps anywhere that I could. So University of San Diego, Pepperdine, I don't need to list all of them, but a lot of West Coast camps. And that introduced me to a few different people. Also, I had a relationship with the coaching staff across the street at the University of San Diego. That is another long story. So to shorten that, I essentially, between some of those relationships, I got the opportunity to go out to San Antonio and be an assistant video coordinator, and went from there.
Okay. That San Antonio video room has produced some great coaches over the years. What is it about that organization that, sets coaches up for long-term success?
It's hard to say for each guy what it meant. I know for me, it was the opportunity to present and talk and discuss and debate different ideas. Pop always encouraged everybody to come in prepared with a thought for whatever the thing is that we needed to discuss. So whether it was a particular game, whether it was free agency, whether it was the summer and we were talking about the draft, we had a lockout one year, so we had several meetings and lots of debates on how we wanted to do things. And he encouraged everybody to come in with ideas and what have you done and how did you teach this? And it was huge for me because it not only made you think about what you thought was the right thing to do for the team or philosophically, but it really opened your mind to a lot of different things that some of the other coaches had done because we had all come from different backgrounds. I think just that inclusive culture in terms of wanting, not only, expecting you to have something, but wanting to hear that and wanting to get your input made you feel a big part of what was being done there.
Did that almost throw you off, like being an assistant? I think you said assistant video coordinator, and all of a sudden you're being called on in staff meetings and expected to have an opinion?
Sure. It was a little, at times you're looking around the room and you're thinking, wow, like Hank Egan was the guy that actually I knew the most before I got there. And I had such a tremendous amount of respect for not only how he had helped me, but obviously his coaching career, Air Force Academy, what he had done at the University of San Diego, taking teams to the NCAA tournament. And so, he's in the room. Paul Pressey, who when I was a kid, watching him play with the Bucks and sort of the origination of the point forward, but how good those teams were and realizing how good they were, yet it was so difficult for them to get past Philadelphia and Boston, and knowing how good those teams must be. And then just being able to talk to him about that. And then obviously Pop and, all the people that came through the room throughout the years. But those early years, you look around the room and you feel like, okay, where is my time? Where is my place? But it was encouraged, like the questions were coming and you just, like I said, you had to be prepared.
And this is the late 90s, right? So this is Avery Johnson, David Robinson. Was Tim Duncan there yet, or did he come in?
He wasn't there when I first got there, but shortly thereafter, yeah.
What was it like? I'm sure with this being your first NBA experience, maybe you couldn't appreciate it at the time, but over 20 years later, what was it like being around that group of guys? And did you understand how special they were at the moment?
100%. Absolutely knew how special it was. In this group of guys, it wasn't just their basketball abilities. Like you weren't amazed and impressed by just how well they played the game. It was their character, their knowledge, who they were as people. These guys are, like I've said this before, like with a guy like David Robinson, people talk about him being one of the top 50 players of all time, and Tim as well. But they're top 50 people too, just high character, and it made you feel welcome. And I really appreciated that because when I got there, they had been to the playoffs. They had gone deep into, I think they had gone into conference finals and semifinals, just hadn't been to the NBA finals. So these guys were successful as individuals, as teams. And so at first, when you get there, it can be a little bit overwhelming. But the one thing I would say is it was just basketball in terms of we were doing basketball drills. We were scrimmaging, doing what, like the hardest thing was when we start scrimmaging and I've got the whistle in my mouth. I'm like, okay. Calling fouls is not a lot of fun in some of those scrimmages. And you can ask most coaches, they don't like doing it. But part of it is because there's this fine line between what you're trying to accomplish as a coaching staff and actually calling the fouls. So you want to teach certain things, but you don't want to stop the scrimmages all the time. So that having been said, it was an amazing experience. But again, that group of guys, made me feel welcome, but I knew not only how talented these players were, but also just what the type of individuals they were.
What an amazing introduction for you into the NBA game to be around that organization. I got to imagine you are always drawing back to that, time in San Antonio. But do people are people sick of hearing San Antonio stories from you? The teams you work with, are they like, oh, here goes Joe with another Spurs anecdote?
No, I don't think so. I mean, at least no one has told me that as of right
Yeah.
now. Maybe they are. They just haven't filled me in. But the other thing is I spent 9 years there, and that is a long, long time in this industry. I was blessed to be a part of 3 championships and several other great runs. So I do call on that a lot for my experiences, but I've been, as you mentioned before, I've been very fortunate with experiences in Dallas and Portland and Cleveland and Brooklyn and Milwaukee and even Phoenix here for a brief time that really have helped shape where I am today. And so there's no question my time in San Antonio was special. I call on it a lot, but I feel very fortunate to have had all the experiences that I've had.
I'm skipping ahead a little bit, but do you coach a team like San Antonio, a veteran group with that great, internal leadership? Do you coach that type of team different than you coach, say like a Phoenix Suns, a very young team that's still, maturing?
Yes, there is a different level of things. I'll give you here's a good example. So my first 12 years, in the league, 9 in San Antonio, 3 in Dallas. We went to the playoffs every year but the first year. And I got to Portland, and that team had not been to the playoffs. They had been, but not for 5 or 6 years. In fact, they hadn't been above 500 in 3 or 4 or 5 years at that point. And we made it. We won 54 games that year. We went to the playoffs, and I remember at that time thinking, okay, here we go. This is just what you do. You play the regular season, you have a good regular season, you're building, trying to grow, get better. And then you get to the playoffs and, now you're playing that series where it's game after game against the same opponent. And by the time you get deep into it, you know them as well as you know your own team. So we had our, I don't even know how many practices we had, but we had a rally downtown. They not a parade, but we went, I think it's called Pioneer Square, and there was thousands of people out there. We all went on stage. Players were talking on the microphone to the fans saying thank you. We had bussed down there from the practice facility, and I thought, this is pretty cool. I know we have to devote our time to getting ready for the playoffs, but this is pretty cool because we didn't do these things in San Antonio and Dallas. This was meaning we were anticipating going to the playoffs. And so then we went and played that first game. And I remembered as the flow of the game was going, we could have practiced for a long, long time and still would have had some difficulty in that game because our guys were young and hadn't been there. They needed to go through it. They needed to go through the experience of being in a playoff game. And so as much as coaching the team was telling them this is what's going to happen, this is how it's going to be, they still had to go through it. And that was a little different. And you realize that even though you're teaching certain things that are the same and, based on your coaching staff or coaching philosophies, some things might change drastically. And when I say that, maybe we're all sending pick and rolls on the sideline away from the screen. So some teams call it blue, some teams call it ice. That's not that different. But where you decide to put the big when you blue or ice, or how you tell the guard to defend it, that could be a big difference. So you're still teaching, but your concepts might be a little bit different. And then the process under which it's going to, like I said, in San Antonio, we were expecting to go to the finals. In Portland, we were excited to be in the playoffs, expecting to advance, but it was just harder because the guys had never been there.
Does that determine how hard you push and when you push your guys? Is that just a feel?
It's a factor. I mean, everything's a factor, right? Where you are in the season is going to make a difference. How many games have you played? Like, in fact, our championship year, people talked about how, oh, you only played 50 games. We were playing 5 games in 6 nights. It was crazy. The schedule was, a lot of times in the NBA, you don't know what day of the week it is. Sometimes I'd be walking out to the court before the game thinking about a team that we were playing 2 games ahead of us and realizing as I got out to the court, because it was a long walk at the Alamo Dome from the locker room to the court, I was like, oh man, I got to refocus here. We're not playing that team.
Right. How do you, speaking of like the NBA, again, I'm jumping around here, but speaking of the NBA schedule and how many games you play in a week, like I know at the college level how hard it is to balance family and being a father and a husband with a college basketball season. That's just 32 games. Can you talk about doing that at the NBA level where you're playing over 100 games, if you're with an organization like the Spurs?
Yeah, no, it is difficult. And that was one thing that I shouldn't say one thing, another thing that I really appreciated with Pop is that he always talked about that balance that you need. You need to fill the cup back up and feel like you've got that energy again to go the next day or the next practice or the next game. And it's really, really important because you not only have the things that you know are coming, there are the unexpected things as well. I can give you an example, being in the video room and the team was on the road. I wasn't traveling on this trip. They call late after a game because it was on the West Coast. And they said, we need this, and this, and we need it by tomorrow morning because we're coming home. We're going to have practice. We're going to watch film. And so this was at 10:30 at night and, got into the office right away, worked until I don't even know what time, but got it done and we were ready to go the next morning. But it's that balance of, okay, you can enjoy the time that you have where you don't have to be working, so to speak, because there's always something you could be doing. But maximizing that so that when you're back on and devoting that time to coaching or prepping or whatever it is, workouts, individual workouts, that you're engrossed in that too.
Okay. Skipping ahead a little bit, you spent some time with the Mavericks, a really good Mavericks team. Dirk is there. Can you talk a little bit about that culture? I mean, again, a lot of success, but every program is different. How does that compare to San Antonio and even Portland? And maybe what separated Dirk from some of the others?
Yeah, Dirk was amazing, and another, talking about the guys in San Antonio and high character, he was the exact same. Unbelievable person. He's always been that way. Particularly with me. I mean, I can't speak for everybody else, but one of those things where the relationship grew pretty quickly, meaning I knew when he started giving me a hard time about different things, I knew we were pretty good friends at that point. But I think what was interesting was having come from San Antonio, and we were considered rivals at the time, that the Texas Triangle is pretty good rivalries there with Houston, Dallas, and San Antonio. But we had beaten them in the playoffs. I believe it was in 2003. They had started growing. They had Nash and a young Dirk. Nash had gone to Phoenix. And they had brought in Jason Terry. They had drafted Josh Howard. So they had a very good young nucleus when I arrived, but it wasn't completely young. Josh and Marquise Daniels were 2 of the younger players on the team, and Devin Harris. But the Dirk, Jet, we had Jerry Stackhouse, Keith Van Horn. That group was significantly more veteran. So we had a very good balance there. I think the one thing that stood out to me was somebody had asked me one time, why you would leave San Antonio for Dallas. And obviously the opportunity for me individually was a little bit better in terms of getting to the front of the bench, but I had a very good relationship with Avery Johnson, knew how good of a coach he was. And I thought it was exciting to be able to take that team to the next step. Like San Antonio hadn't won a championship. It was great to be a part of building that, being there when Pop first started, being there for as long as we were, going to Dallas and seeing, okay, there's an opportunity to do that here as well. And we had a great start. We went to the finals our first year. We won the most games of anybody during our 3-year stretch there together. So it was a very successful time.
Okay, and then years later, you're with Milwaukee. This is from 14 to 18, and you get the opportunity. You take over as interim head coach. Can you talk about? And you never get to control like when you get your opportunity, right? An interim spot in the middle of a season is certainly probably one of the most difficult things to have to pull off. But it is what it is, and you gotta coach your team and figure it out. Can you talk about what goes into moving over that one chair and how that was for you?
Sure, it's tough in regards to. Well, I know for me that situation was. I mean, Coach Kidd and his family, and like it was a friend. Or it is a friend in that situation where you're like, okay, wait a sec, what just happened? And so you realize when it happens, okay, what's going on? But we know what we have to do in terms of we have a game tonight. And so it kind of takes you back, but then you got to dial it in real quickly because you're going to go play a game, and the whole objective hasn't changed. Like that was one thing that happened that night is everybody was saying, okay, well, what happens now? What happens? Well, I don't know what happens now. I just know that tonight we have a game and we've all got a job to do. And that was kind of the message to the players in regards to like the immediate thing was, okay, this is taking us all by surprise and we're a little bit shocked, but we still have a job to do. And I give the guys a ton of credit for being very professional. Ironically, the team we played that night was Phoenix. And so what I would say, it's very difficult in situations like that, trying to change a whole lot. You don't have time to go in and implement your own system. You have to do everything gradually. And as the latter part of the season comes along, you're not even getting that much practice time anyways. So what we did was we tweaked a few things, but not much. And then by the playoffs, we had made a few different changes. In our series against Boston, they were the number one. I think they were the number one ranked defense during the year that year. And we had the best field goal percentage. I think we shot 50-something%, had a high offensive rating, and people were surprised. Well, we had tweaked a few things, but we didn't need to overhaul the whole system because what the foundation was pretty good. It was just a matter of our guys becoming comfortable with each other. Like Eric Bledsoe had just come in, hadn't even been with us for a full year. We had a lot of injuries during that. Malcolm Brogdon and Matthew Dellavedova missed 9 weeks. I think after the change, Malcolm might have played like 5 games and Delly like 2. So you roll with the punches. You understand there's a responsibility to do what's best for the team, but it is very difficult. It's a tough scenario to be in for anybody that takes over midseason.
How did you see yourself grow as a coach during that span from whatever it was, January maybe through the playoffs?
Anytime you go through being, changing roles, for example, in Dallas, I was our quote unquote defensive coordinator, did all our preps. In Cleveland, I did all our offense. In Milwaukee, I did our offense. So, now going from an assistant to the head coach, I'm not saying it's the same, but you sort of preparing yourself all along the way. Like you talk about your time in San Antonio. That was one of the things Pop was always kind of forcing us into without making us realize, or without us realizing it, was, hey, why aren't you thinking about this too? These are things that a head coach would have to think about. This scenario, this play, or when would you run this, or what would you do in these situations, like fouling at the end of a game if you have a 3-point lead. That wasn't in vogue 25 years ago here. It was something that was just done in Europe, but now everybody says you should foul. Okay, well, those were great debates to have. Well, now as the head coach, you have to implement the thoughts that you have, or digest the things that everybody's presenting to you, just like Pop was doing with us. Hey, everybody present your ideas, and then I'm going to figure out what's best for the team, or we will figure out what's best for the team. So you grow immensely. You learn from every experience that you're in. It was great going to a Game 7. Obviously, wish we could have beaten Boston in that first series, but I give them credit for, they've had, I think it's like 3 out of the last 4 years they've been to the Eastern Conference Finals, and they do a great job.
Okay. Then you spend a year in Phoenix, and this profession, we talk about it all the time in this podcast. It's so unpredictable, and if you coach long enough, you're going to get fired. And we all the time have, I hear from young coaches who go through that. They get let go. They find themselves out of a job, and just the emotional and mental toll it takes on them, and the stress, of trying to find, the next gig or whatever. It's a challenge. And people don't talk about it a lot. You, even though you've had this amazing career, you found yourself in that situation here after your stint in Phoenix this past year. What's that been like for you? And obviously, you're probably at the point in your career where another opportunity is going to come. But can you talk a little bit about this past year and how it's been for you?
Sure. Yeah, you never really know. I mean, that's the one thing about this business is it's sort of an insecure business in terms of you don't know what's going to happen from day to day. You do what you can. You do the best to prepare and be ready for each circumstance. And so for me, I've utilized the time to do different things. So pre-pandemic, I went and visited several coaches in the NBA, went and visited quite a few teams, spent some time watching practices, talking to them as much as I could during their camps. I went to several colleges, watched a lot of prep events. Fortunately, here there had been, I should say, pre-pandemic, lots of opportunities to watch regional tournaments, prep tournaments, individual tournaments. So going and seeing what different coaches are doing, not only with their teams, but individually. So just the opportunity to go and watch those things before the pandemic was huge. Post-pandemic, in regards to that stuff, just being online, doing clinics, doing Rising Coaches podcasts, all the different things that you're able to do online now has been beneficial. Now, obviously, I enjoy doing these things in person more so, but clearly being able to take advantage of the opportunity with, like I said, different clinics online, podcasts, different shows. With that, I've done several clinics online, hosted a NBA Sirius show, been a guest on Sirius XM for the NBA, do some other shows here and there. Did multiple camps and clinics all over the world. In fact, went to Paris to do a clinic, did a clinic in Florida, done some here in Arizona as well. Putting your own stuff together, organizing your notes, like coaching philosophy, coaching files. What would you do? End of game situations, last 6 minutes, drills, daily drills. But getting all of that organized, trying to read more books when you don't have time to do that. I've spent a lot of time reading books, anything from sports to leadership books to fun books. I've also spent time doing some youth coaching. So that's been great. Started mentorship business, consulting business, and really enjoying that and the opportunity to again have an impact with people, within the coaching profession, not only to help them, but in some ways they're helping me, as like you said, going over a seat. Well, you step back, and instead of moving over a seat, you step back and look and see what other people are doing or going through. And you can not only help them, but you can get some insight into how they handle things. And again, I know that's a lot kind of gone on here a little bit, and then obviously getting the opportunity to coach with Team USA in November and February was really special. Really, I can't say enough about my experiences with Team USA. So having gone through all that, I feel like, wait a sec, where did all the time go?
Yeah, it sounds like you didn't waste too much time dwelling on it and woe is me or stressing about the next opportunity. You really took advantage of the time and learned and organized and gave back.
Well, I definitely feel like I've been doing that. But I think the other thing that I felt like at the time was, okay, we've only been here, got here, was here for a year, surprised that things turned out the way that they did, but it happens, right? Like you said, the unexpected, just an insecure bit or an unsecure business. But I figured, okay, my choices are, if I don't have a job, I can sit around and be miserable, or I can be productive, and I can take time to spend with the family that I haven't even had. So one thing I will say is, again, pre-pandemic, the fact that I was able to spend a Christmas, a Thanksgiving with family, not only my family, but not only my immediate family, but family like brothers and my father and my wife's family, like being able to do things with them at those times that I've never been able to do. In fact, our year in Phoenix, we were not only gone on Thanksgiving, we were gone on Christmas and, through the holidays. So being able to get those times, or it makes it even that much more special. And so like I said, I could have been miserable. I had a choice. I could be miserable, or I could take advantage of what's available to me. And that's what I did. And I've tried to maximize that family time along with all of these other things that I've been able to do.
Hey, good for you. You mentioned the consulting business. If people do want to work with you, you are taking on mentees. The best place to find you could go to risingcoachesconsulting.com. Shout out to Matt Gordon, who's done an unbelievable job with that program. And I know you've really helped a lot of coaches throughout this year, just mentoring them through various challenges that they've gone through. Has that been enjoyable? Have you enjoyed?
I've loved it.
Yeah.
Yes, I have. I really do. I've met some great people. It's not only the individual one-on-one consulting and mentorship work that I do or we do. It's also when we get together as groups periodically and throw ideas out there. It's the chats that Matt puts online that we can go through. So the program I've been very pleased with how it's gone. And like I said, the opportunity to meet some of these other coaches has been great for me.
Good. And then finally, let's get to the good stuff. I'm sorry it took so long to get to it, but Team USA, you mentioned you spent time with them in November and February, coaching Team USA in the AmeriCup preliminary qualifiers. This seems like a series of qualifying events for the AmeriCup. It seems a very complicated process to qualify eventually for the World Cup and the Olympics, right? Can you kind of explain how that works?
Yeah, it is a little bit different. So what it used to be, so when I was the head coach for the Great Britain national team, the program was you played in your region. So for Europe, it was called Eurobasket. In America, or the Americas, it's called the AmeriCup. Now, it used to be called the Tournament of the Americas, I believe. But so you would have so the Olympics would happen. That's kind of the end of the cycle. And then you would have your regional, then your world championships, or your World Cup is what it's referred to now. And then your region again. So Eurobasket, World Cup, or AmeriCup, World Cup, AmeriCup, Olympics. So that's what it was. So in 2017, they decided to change. FIBA, the governing body for international basketball, decided to change that format. And when they did that, it became there would be a year off, and then there would be what I can't remember is I believe the format was Olympics would happen, which would be the end of the cycle. Then it would be year off region, so AmeriCup, World Cup, and then the Olympics. I may be wrong about where the break was, but there was always one summer that would be off before either the World Cup or before the AmeriCup. And so this is the first time through that cycle. Like I said, it began in 2017. The Olympics that were supposed to be last year would have been the end of this first cycle and first run through it. It is a difficult process in terms of you have to play your games within your pod. So our pod was your pool. Ours was with Mexico, Bahamas, and Puerto Rico. Once you advance out of that, you qualify for the AmeriCup. But you have to keep doing that. So you have to qualify again for the World Cup, and then you have to qualify again for the Olympics. So the process is pretty difficult, but there's a lot more international competitions, February, November, and then obviously what takes place in the summer months.
So the thing that stands out to me is that this took place, like you said, in February, November, which is right in the middle of like the NBA season. So it's not like the Olympics, which we think about. Okay, you got LeBron. Okay, he don't want to go, so let's go the next day. All right, we'll get Kevin Durant. This is you're having to put together a roster of guys, I'm assuming, that aren't on NBA rosters, correct?
Correct. That's absolutely correct. So for those that follow, one of the things that FIBA wanted to do was follow what FIFA had done, is they have these windows in which their teams, their players leave their club teams and go join their national team. It's a very I've spoken with some people in FIFA, and it is a very difficult process. I mean, imagine somebody playing in the Premier League that plays for, let's say, the Brazilian national team. So that player in the Premier League has to leave England at some point after their game, fly all the way to Brazil, prep and play with their national team, and then fly back. So it in speaking to those people as this process was starting to evolve, like I said, back in 2016 and eventually 17, it's difficult to be able to get players at that time. So certain leagues around the world said, okay, we'll have breaks at this time to allow players to play. So Coach Van Gundy was the first coach, I believe, in these windows, followed by Coach Fratello. And I bring up Coach Fratello because in prepping for the November window, we were watching their games against Puerto Rico from the previous February window. And they played Puerto Rico in a home-and-home situation, which is what these were supposed to be, so that international teams in these federations could host games rather than everything always, essentially all your games outside of friendlies are always on the road unless you're the host nation. And I never looked at the friendlies as, boy, we have to go win this. They were always viewed as, this is prep for whatever the tournament was, for Eurobasket or the Eurobasket qualifiers. So now you've sort of taken that aspect away. You still play friendlies, like Team USA is going to play friendly games before they go to the Olympics. But those games don't really matter. They don't count on your record. It isn't going to determine whether you get a gold medal or not. These games and these windows are a big deal. So the players that do play, even though they're not coming from the NBA or EuroLeague teams, they are very important for these teams to advance. So what these guys did for Team USA in these windows has been huge.
So how are you putting the roster together, and how involved are you? I mean, you got a few guys like Isaiah Thomas, Joe Johnson, Brandon Bass. Obviously, we know those names. They've had, long NBA careers. But then you guys, I don't know, did you get creative and find the next best available players out there? And how did that work?
Yeah, it's not an easy process, no matter who you're with. But what I will say immediately is that Sean Ford and his staff, the people that he has putting these teams together, and when we have meetings discussing it, they do an unbelievable job of not only having names, but understanding where they are, if they're available, having spoken to their agents, knowing if there's even a chance they might play with us. It's really incredible their wealth, and I just say depth and breadth of knowledge of these players for trying to assemble these teams, because as you said, it's not easy. The two teams that I've been a part of were very different and put together differently because the circumstances were different. Having said that, I think there's only been one player since the February 2020 window that's been the same throughout. So for the last 3 windows, Team USA has had an entirely new roster. And whereas if you look at Mexico and the Bahamas, everybody on their team this last window either played in the first window or the second. And they beat Mexico in the first window, which is predominantly what they had here in this last window. So I'm going to try and shorten the explanation here because it is a difficult process. The first window for us in November primarily consisted of G League guys because the G League at that time wasn't starting, but the difficult part, or hadn't started. The difficult part, though, was that the NBA was about to start. So guys that were going to camps were not going to be coming to play for Team USA most likely. So it was a process to try and figure out, okay, who can make it. But then if guys do come to Team USA and get a camp invite, okay, well, this is one thing we've always said is that if an opportunity arises, we're going to help you with that in any way that we can. So it was difficult to assemble that team, and that team was primarily G League or international guys. This time, well, now the G League was playing for this window here in February. The NBA obviously is playing. European teams are playing. So you had several guys like an Isaiah Thomas, a Joe Johnson, that or a Brandon Bass maybe, that currently weren't playing, but obviously still have tremendous ability to play this game at a high level. On the other end of the spectrum, and I can even add like Josh Boone into that, where these guys have wealth of NBA experience, and they are, in their mid-30s, or in some cases even older. We also had a guy like KJ Fagan, who had never even played a professional game. And ironically, he was a guy that when he got into camp, we were going through our quarantine process. We got out. We had our first practice. We're still testing every day, going through all of that. And he got a job and he signed we were very excited for him. But the difference between, a guy who's never played an NBA game or a professional game, to guys that have been all-stars, that have, NBA all-stars and played at, the highest level you can and done special things, that gap was very different on this level.
And I can't imagine, especially during a COVID year, having that you get a ton of time to work with these guys before you got to start playing games, right? How do you get that chemistry?
Yeah, that's one of the biggest things, is trying to do as much as you can even before you get on the floor. Trying to have Zoom meetings. It's not only the not being able to get on the floor right away, it's having to be in quarantine. What every one of these guys has done to commit to doing this and going into a bubble, to test every day, to literally you have to check into your hotel room and you can't leave except to go get tested for a certain amount of time. And then you still people are like, oh, it's great, you get to go to Puerto Rico. Well, yeah, I mean, we could have been sitting anywhere, right? Because we can't leave the hotel and other than for the games. And so what Team USA did to pull that off in Indianapolis and what was done in Puerto Rico was very impressive, that things were able to be handled as they were. But again, that's a tribute to every one of the guys that committed to going to play for Team USA. And again, you had guys like Dakota Mathias, who he was in Philadelphia maybe a week or two before. It was helping him win a game, or games. And he got released, and fortunately this opportunity came up, and he was another one of those. I mean, we had like 7 guys average double figures. And so when you talk about chemistry, these guys played very selfless basketball. They were more than willing to commit to each other right from the beginning. And I appreciated that. It was something that we talked about. It's in Zoom meetings. We went over philosophy things. We went over rules. But these guys were very open, and you could see it in the way that we played and how many guys were willing to share the ball or talk on defense and do what needed to be done to win games.
And you guys you won all your games, right? 6-0. Mm-hmm. Did you feel, is there a certain level of pressure when you put on the USA jersey or coach the USA team? I mean, that's a big deal. It's not a big deal. Like, people don't, how do I put this? It's expected to win, right? So if you win the America prelims, maybe not too many people, it's not on the front page of Sports Illustrated, but if you were to lose, now everyone's talking about it, it's a big deal. Do you feel the weight of that being associated with Team USA, or you don't worry about it?
Yeah, no, I mean, you definitely know that you are the best team in the world. You are the number 1 ranked team in the world. And when you put that jersey on, you represent something a lot bigger than yourself. And that's a big deal. So no, it is a big deal. And yes, there is pressure, but there is also the pressure that you just as an individual competitor or as a person coaching or playing puts on yourself to do, because, and what I've said throughout this process is that there is a standard and we have to uphold that. So yes, we had qualified, and there's different approaches to it. I mean, I can go into an example of what I mean, but I think the important part here is just understanding what you were just talking about. Being a member of Team USA is a big deal. It is a huge honor, and nobody that I've been around during these 2 windows takes that lightly at all. You come in there knowing what you're a part of and are appreciative of it. And that's what I appreciate, again, from all players to all staff members, all coaches, everybody they do things in a very professional manner, and that goes a long way.
What about tactically, when you're in a situation like that and you don't have much time to prepare? Are you tactically keeping it very, very simple?
Yes, trying to keep it. What you don't want to do is, for lack of a better phrase, paralysis by analysis, or, if you do that and your players are out there frozen trying to think of one of 700 plays they're trying to run that they learned that week, you're putting yourself in a bad spot. You've got to give a template or a framework for the guys to work with. You've got to give them a defensive package and an offensive package that they can process and be able to go out and execute, as opposed to going out and trying to think it through. The other thing that you have to do is guys are coming in different conditioning situations. Some guys have been able to do work, some guys haven't. And so you're trying to get guys their game legs without taking them away. So you're managing, getting your system put in, getting time to scrimmage, getting some conditioning within that, but then making sure they have their legs by the time the back-to-back games come. And your games, we played our first game at 5:30. We were right back out there at 6 o'clock. So it's not even 24 hours. And in some cases, the time frame could be worse for you, meaning you could be playing an 8 o'clock game and coming back at a 5 o'clock start. So there's a ton of factors, and you really have to balance that, all those factors, I should say, in terms of getting the guys prepared making sure they're conditioned and in shape for a game that's played a little bit differently pace wise. Like there's only 2 timeouts a half, and there's no mandatories. You could play a whole quarter. You could get a 10-minute quarter done in, 12 minutes if there were no dead balls and things went, quick, take it out or things like that. It goes very fast.
What's next for you in regards to USA basketball? Is that reevaluated after every tournament, or do you have a long-term role with them?
Yeah, no, I mean, I don't know. Well, what I know is there's a lot of things that are going to come up within, and this is the part that when I talk about what Sean Ford and his staff do, this is the part that people don't realize. It isn't just the national team or the senior team. There are age groups, so U18, U19, U20s. They're playing events all over the world, and so Samson Coyote and BJ Domingo have been doing those roles in terms of helping organize those. There's other guys as well that help with the process. Again, I don't feel bad when I don't name everybody, but again, Sean Ford's staff is really, really impressive with how they get this organized. But those events are going to be coming up. Then you've got obviously the Olympics coming up this year. And then there will be another window coming beyond that. And at that point, hopefully, I'll have a job and I won't be able to do it. But if I don't, I would be truly honored to be back with Team USA.
Great stuff, Joe. Well, listen, I really appreciate you spending the time with us today. And I really appreciate you doing everything you're doing on the mentoring front at Rising Coaches Consulting. Joe, it's been an honor and fun to get to watch you work here in the background for the last 6 months or so. So thank you for everything, and we truly appreciate it.
Thanks, Adam. Always good to chat with you.
Take care.
Thanks, you.